don't have certain expectations for the readers, is it really a horror story? So there's certain elements that kind of have to be present throughout. But we look for stories that really flip tropes in our head because that's what you're looking for in genre fiction, whether it's horror, suspense, mystery, romance, whatever it might be. Yes, there's reader expectations that you want the stories to hit, but also you want to shock them here, shock them there.
And I think that the things that are happening in the stories are different from a lot of traditional horror. And Stephen Graham Jones wrote the foreword to the first one, and he tried to explain that to people. And some people are still kind of mystified. And he's like, sometimes the stories just end. And then people be, how come the story just ended? It's like, he told you that sometimes the story just ends.
Yeah, if you come across anyone, a lot of different tribes across the country, the stories can end abruptly.
Then there's not an explanation, and that that goes way deep in tradition. There are stories that you're just like, I have to sit with this one for a long time, sometimes a lifetime, to get the meaning of what happened in that story. And sometimes that's a feature in Native horror that I would say, if you were looking for something different, what is in Indigenous horror that's not in the sort of mainstream, there's this.
Yeah.
Structures are a little bit different, and the endings are often quite different, and that would be something I could key in on.
Yeah, I think the reader expectation for a lot of genre fiction would be, in the Western canon that they're used to, like Ted's saying, the mainstream, is that most stories have like a nice red bow tied at the end, and everything's perfectly okay.
The final girl makes it.
Yeah. And, I think a lot of Native stories, whether traditional or contemporary, are ambiguous endings or just leave a little bit enough for it to like just worm into your brain and just kind of stay there. And then you're thinking about it. Those are the endings that I love personally.
Yeah. I think Indigenous horror is, I don't want to say unique because that's probably obvious on the face of it since it's labeled or tagged or whatever. But I think there are so many stories out there. And, a lot of sort of post-colonial world. It's not really post because the colonists are still here. But in that sort of thing, you have the horrors of that, but you also we're living in a post-apocalyptic world for Native nations. And so there's a lot to draw on in that way. But there are also tens of thousands of years of traditions too. There's just a real rich world that people can pull from and describe and talk about and use to make sense of the world today.
And I think there's just so little education or knowledge about Indigenous peoples in general in North America and elsewhere that just us existing and writing spooky tales catches people off guard. Like, whoa, some of these are modern tales that have, natives experiencing the world as it is right now, and there's a lot to pull from. There's, hundreds of nations across this nation that we're in right now, the continent, Turtle Island. But as we keep making these books, I think more and more people will come to appreciate horror written by Indigenous peoples, and we're just getting started.
I think, there is something to be said too, because quite a few of these stories are contemporary. These are contemporary stories from contemporary folks. And for a lot of education systems, they do. I'm older, so I grew up and it was like, paper headbands and turkey feather, things at Thanksgiving. And it pretty much stops in fourth grade, unless you have like a language arts teacher who's like, pick your tribe or whatever. So there's a total erasure. And so when you have stories where, so I was at the 7-Eleven and people are like, wait, what? There's contemporary natives in the world. And the stories that come from that, I think people react to and are like, oh, wow. And that's a good thing. Because then when you see like the reviews and the things people say, oh, there's a whole bunch of authors I need to read now, right, that are out there. So it's not relegated to history. We're making history now, and that's really important.
Yeah, I also think it has to do with just kind of contemporary gatekeeping, and that there hasn't been a lot of Native authors going into the genre of horror. I think more and more people are seeing that there's actual value and interest in these stories where editors, agents, etc. are all seeing, hey, people actually want to read spooky stories from Indigenous people. So we're really happy to be a part of that growing genre.
Yeah.
This project came together through just us coming together online and both of us having the right timing. We just started talking in back channels, and we decided to go at it ourselves. We kept cold emailing, cold DMing folks to join us. Everyone said yes the whole time. And then along the way, we got an agent to represent us for the project, which was pretty crazy for us coming from the indie world. And it just exploded from there. It's been an amazing process.
And I think a lot of it was really community driven. And I think the response initially was the same, right?
Yeah.
A lot of folks in the community were just like, oh, wow, we've been waiting for this. And so it came together in that way, and it kind of launched in that same way. So it was really nice to see that come together that way. And then the editing part is, writers are different. Some people are just like, boom, here it is. And some people are like, I can't send it yet. I can't send it yet. And they do a lot of self-editing. And then some people just stop looking at it. Just send it,
Mm-hmm.
So we're looking at different levels of writing. But ultimately, the goal is to make it the very best it can be. And because we have a little more objectivity, it's like in your own writing, you're fixing stuff as you read it. So I'm always like, and I teach where I'm like, read it out loud, because it makes a big difference. And so we're basically reading out loudly other people's work. Mm-hmm. And because it's more objective to us, though, sometimes I have to cover the name because, like, I don't want to say this to them. But, like, you have to fix this part. You have to do better with it. We can fix this. Mm-hmm. And there's all kinds of little, word repetition. There's just a lot of things that editors do to improve the story.
The first book was 26 writers. Well, 24 outside of us.
Yeah.
And now we have 21 stories in part 2. So about 19 people to wrangle. A lot of follow-up emails and such, but most people are good about coming in. But yeah, it's definitely curating. It's sometimes word choice. We don't really have an exact process. We kind of like go with the flow. With maybe Ted goes line by line and catches repetition and word choice, and maybe I catch something developmental, like, hey, there's something incongruous over here. Yeah, we want to make these authors shine, especially in the first one. We had an author that it was their first time ever being published, Remy Boudreau.
We have to take great care with those because people are trusting us to put their work out there, so we want to make it the best.
Yeah.
And then on the writing side, it's because we're two different generations. I think it's complementary. We can look at these things, and college teacher, high school teacher, so there's a couple different levels. There's similarities, but there's differences too. And I think it helps us to put together the best collection and find the best stories and work with those. So it's been really, really good. It has been a hell of a ride. Plus, we like tacos, and so when we meet up, we get to eat really good tacos. So.
Definitely. When we were thinking about the title, we wanted something that would not exactly be pan-Indian. We wanted to avoid that, but also think of kind of a belief that kind of spans nations, even globally, in that we come across this Never Whistle at Night. We've heard these tales as kids. It spans different nations. There's different warnings. Different things come out of the woods or follow you, spirits, snakes, what have you. And we wanted something that would maybe speak to a lot of different nations, different people. And I was really pushing for maybe a horror-sounding title that matches like the old VHS tapes that you come across. So we flipped it into, I think at first we had Whistling at Night. And then I thought, maybe we kind of put a negative at the front, Never Whistle at Night.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of stuck from there.
You see that title, you hear that title, and it signifies. You're like, okay, so there's a certain audience that's for. And I think for a lot of not just native horror, but native fiction and native media, it's like Pixar. There's two stories going on here. So as an adult, you could take your kids to Pixar movies and they're like, yay. And then as an adult, you're like, there's more things going on here. And so I think in Indigenous fiction, there's often that. There are certain things that are within the story that some people get, and some people won't. And it doesn't derail from the story, but the people who get it are like, oh yeah, so it makes a difference. But also too, sometimes it happens where then people will do the research, and I don't remember Reservation Dogs, and he had the owl on the thing,
Yeah,
and they barlered out
eyes.
Man, I almost fell out of my chair. That was so funny. But then on social media, people are like, why? What is that? What does that mean? Yeah. And so I think that's part of it too, is like, do some research.
Yeah.
We don't like in my writing, and Shane too, and in the book, we don't like translate. If there's a native word, that's the word. I don't like that sort of follow-up translation. If you want to know what it means, go look it up. Do some work. So I think that's a big part of it too.
Yeah.
And there's not this conscious, use of, native language or whatever in that way. Like it just happens. And sometimes there's a word that just doesn't really translate, or that's the only way that, that being or that verb or whatever. And so that's really an important part of what's happening in the books too. So part two, we've been around and we've asked in sort of informal ways and polling folks, and I've done it at academic audience, I've done it at readings, and like, what would you like to see in the second volume? And they're like, more gore, more horror. So we're like, I'm down with that. So what we really did in the second title, I mean, it's Never Whistle at Night, part two, Back for Blood. So it's definitely horror focus. I mean, the first one was a dark fiction collection. Some people they thought it was just horror, and they're like, well, this is advertised as horror. I'm like, well, that's not what the title says.
Dark fiction anthology.
Yeah, but this one is going to be horror, and sort of all the way, like all gas, no brakes. The stories that we have, I mean, there's a variety. There's some literary horror, some psychological horror. There's full-on monster stories. There's a lot happening there. But yeah, definitely all horror.
Yeah, it's definitely going to scratch that itch more for people that came to the first book and were wondering, is this exactly horror? Questioning it and stuff. It's definitely pedal to the metal, more blood, more guts, more frightening sequences.
Oh, yeah.
We're just trying to go all out with this one. So we hope we reach those fans that, come back for the second one and, find even more readers. With this one, it's definitely more adrenaline.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I'm excited. We're excited for you to get this book in your hands when it comes out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.